on it.
Okay. I'm going to say something else, and of course my brain went, and I forgot what I was going to say.
I was gonna ask,
Um, Angie?
yeah. They always talk about the 2 weeks leading up to. Um,
Um,
can you hear me?
Mic up. Can barely hear you.
Let me see
Yeah,
if I
we
can.
could barely hear you, Angie. If you could put on a
Oh, okay.
headset.
Can you hear me now?
Bingo, thank
Oh,
you.
yes.
Yeah, I
Much
don't know
better.
why my microphone always adjusts downwards. As I was saying, the 2 weeks usually, I don't know if it's a 2 week or a month leading up to the eclipse period, and the month after is usually a really tender time. They say not to take too many drastic actions because there's a lot of things happening during that time. I was just going to add that I've been kind of busy in the last 2 weeks. So I haven't paying too much attention to the configurations here, but I remember writing something up for a major publication about eclipses, and I think as Katerina talked about, there was the Mars square Pluto, but the thing that really stood out to me was the Sun and Moon, obviously squaring Pluto, and the biggest thing was the conjunct the South Node, which is generally South Node is not always, sometimes, but it's usually bad news. That's really powerful. It's always on the at the South Node, a point of weakness, um, like the sort of perversions of that planet, and everything's happening in Libra. So Libra's all about the give and take, the balance, and new moons. Yeah, it's the start of something new. They always talk about that turning a new phase, but that doesn't mean for the positive. It can be start of a new hell, uh, of of the beginning of the end type of thing. Try to stay positive, but in the long run, this may be for the better. Who knows? But just have to mention that.
Okay. I'm going to start the slideshow because then one of the first things we get into is the chart for the eclipse. Okay. All right. Ooh, I even remember start with screen share. Here we go. Everybody seeing this okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Goody goody. Okay, well, I don't know what it is. Agenda, excuse me. I think I'm getting a cold, or I have one. All right. Does anybody have any announcements?
Well, I
Angie, you?
could announce that can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I could announce that I changed my website address to astrologistconnie.com.
Okay. You want to put that in the chat to everybody so they'll have it?
Okay.
Um, Angie, you mentioned that you're working on an article for a publication.
More actually as a just contributors. I've contributed to a lot of different
Okay. I just
astrology.
didn't know if you wanted to give yourself a. Okay. Um, excuse me. So we're gonna be.
And
We'll
I
look
can
at the
announce.
chart. Yeah.
Yeah, I can announce I do my weekly Uranian Times think tank. We meet up on Tuesday nights via video Zoom to talk about geopolitical, culture, weather, progress.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. All right. So you can see the agenda. We got the yesterday's solar eclipse. We got the lunar eclipse coming up in 2 weeks. Then we're going to look at the Hamas attack on Israel. And then we're going to get into solar arc and secondary progressions. And we're going to use that as the chart of Israel and the Hamas attack as our starting point. Um, And then we also have some other charts that we can, if we have time to look at, starting with Fannie Willis, who is the Fulton County District Attorney, who is prosecuting the RICO case against former President Trump and his 18 cohorts. And then we also have charts for Letitia James, who is the New York State Attorney General, who is prosecuting the case against the Trump Organization for financial fraud. And then John Smith, who is the special counsel appointed to look into the investigation of former President Trump's involvement in the January 6th insurrection, riot, demonstration, whatever you prefer to call it. And if we don't have time for we may not have time to get through all those charts, but we have the charts there. So moving along, folks, here we go. The 19th, which is Thursday, we have the Sun-Mercury superior conjunction at 26 Libra 34, which should continue to keep the eclipse point active, to say the least. On the 21st, both the Sun and Mercury will go void of course. Mercury enters Scorpio on the same day, and then there are actually 7 exact major aspects that day. So it's going to be a very active day. On the 23rd, the Sun will enter Scorpio, and Venus will be at its maximum elongation behind the Sun, which means basically that it will rise early in the east, and you'll have your best chance of seeing Venus and watching her for a goodly length of time as she rises in the east well ahead of the Sun. On the 24th, there's going to be 6 exact major aspects. Keep in mind, when I'm talking about major aspects, I'm talking about just the 5 Ptolemaic aspects. I'm not including inconjuncts, quincunxes. But then on the 26th, there will be 4 inconjunct quincunx aspects. I don't remember seeing that many on a single day before, involving the Moon, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Chiron. So if you are susceptible to the energies of quincunxes, that could be quite the day. And if we think of them as being kind of like an irritant, that level of irritation may rise well above normal. On the 28th, it's the Hunter's full moon lunar eclipse. 5 Horus, I believe. On the 29th, Mercury conjuncts Mars. On the 31st, happy Halloween, everybody. Venus waxing trine retrograde Uranus. That's the big event that day. November 2nd, Sun will oppose retrograde Jupiter. On the 3rd, Venus will be opposite retrograde Neptune, and there will be 5 more exact aspects, total of 6 that day. On the 4th, Saturn stations direct, and Mercury will oppose Uranus. On the 6th, Venus goes void of course. On the 8th, Venus enters Libra, and there will be 6 major aspects, one of which will have Mercury going void of course. And then on the 9th, Mercury enters Sagittarius. On the 10th, Mercury makes a waning square to Saturn. And on the 11th, Mars will oppose retrograde Uranus. And on the 12th, we have our next Zoom meeting. It's calling it open mic. You get to pick the topic. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. Okay. Any questions? Comments, thoughts?
James,
All good.
Yeah.
how do you,
Go for it.
when you make that list, how do you, what do you reference to obtain those details? Or how do you go about that?
How do I make up the list?
Mhm.
I use Llewellyn's guide, and I go through and I pick out the major events that as I see them happening. I know most, 99, probably almost every astrologer may talk about the moon going void, of course, but never talks about any of the other planets. And I think we are missing something if we're not tuning into when one of the other planets is basically changing signs and not making aspects. The idea of the moon going void of course, and because their energy is shifting.
You guys, when
That's
is the next full moon?
On the 28th, October 28th.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's the lunar eclipse.
So Llewellyn's guide is like you use like I guess like an ephemeris for like on paper or
Yeah,
software. I guess
it's here now. Yeah, it's like a daily planner. I mean, it's got introductory information that tells you about the signs and the planets and what the stuff means. It's got a list of all the retrogrades. It will then have a week. I get the weekly one with spiral bound, so it works nice, and you can see what's going on by week, and it lists all of the major aspects. It includes in conjunction, and it includes Chiron in all their listings. Doesn't include the nodes as far as listing events, but and then let's see what else does it do. And then it has an ephemeris in the back. Jim Maynard's used to be the best, but he stopped doing it. Just got old and tired, and I know how that feels. So Llewellyn is the only one that's still really doing something like that at this point, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think the Sedona Journal, there's a ton of journals, both printed and online, that do a monthly aspectarian just like this, which you could always cross-reference with your ephemeris for double checking data. But a lot of online journals do that for the month ahead, and astrologers if you subscribe.
Yeah, if you have an astrology program, and you might even be able to do it on astro.com. I haven't even looked to see if you can. You can probably find in there have the ability to generate at least a monthly chart of aspects based on your natal placements. So you can see what aspects, what's going to be happening to your natal planets for the course of the month. Solar Fire does a pretty good one.
Honeycomb Collective does a personal astrological almanac. You just send them your data, and they can send you a 6-month or 12-month calendar in any house system that you're using, and we'll print on each day aspects relating to your chart as well as global transits. And Astrodienst, Astro.com, Cafe Astrology all do planetary transits and major Ptolemaic aspects.
yeah, I've used Astros. I've used different things. I was just curious as to how people obtain their information from different sources. Thank you.
They're handy because they give you a heads up as to when certain aspects are going to occur, and then if you're sensitive to transiting aspects, it can be handy because it will help you get that feel, and you can then start to identify what aspect you might be feeling as they move along over the course of the month. I haven't been able to identify. I don't feel personally that I'm that sensitive to transits. There are certain ones that I watch, Mars through Libra, to name a few, only because I've got Mars and Libra and a load of Libra planets, even though I'm a Virgo. Yeah, it can help give you a sense, and that way, as you start to understand what you're feeling, that can help you then relate that information to, family, friends, clients, however you use your astrology. And even if you just use it for yourself, it can be helpful because once you become attuned to a given transiting aspect and you see that it's coming up again, then you kind of know, then you have a heads up advance warning of what you might expect in terms of how you might feel. The events will change, but that feeling may not. Any other questions? So yeah, I just go through that and pick out some major dates and events.
I have a question, James.
Yeah.
And I can't figure out how to use the raise your hand thing, but
Oh,
um,
okay.
yeah, so I was looking at the calendar, like on October the 24th, you said there's 6 major aspects, and what was the other one? Oh, November 8th, where there's, I guess, 7 major aspects. So I heard somewhere that when there's several different aspects going on at the same time, that it's best to try to attune yourself to the softest aspect. What's your opinion on that? In other words, just to make it
Oh.
easy on yourself. Like if there's trines and oppositions going on, just try to attune yourself to the trine.
I never thought about that, actually, because like I say, I don't really follow my transits. I don't really follow transits. Um, they're going to happen, and it's like, it is foretold, it is written, it's chiseled in stone. Because you can look as far ahead as you want to, and you can identify when any of these aspects will happen to your natal chart. Like I say, I mentioned the Mars transits through Libra. That one seems to affect me more so than the others do, and so that's what I kind of watch for, which fortunately only happens about every other year. Doesn't seem to have the same effect when it goes through Aries, fortunately. But yeah, I would say, yeah, if you tune to the softest aspect, which is not necessarily going to be the strongest aspect, um, you know, I can see where trying to tune to the softer aspects may help may help to lessen the effect of any stronger aspects, or you may end up getting caught off guard with the stronger aspects. I would consider which aspects are impacting your chart.
Okay.
That's where I would start. Because there may be 7 exact major aspects, but these are the transits to transits, not
Mm.
transits to your natal chart. So you need to look and say, okay, well, where are these happening and which one is going to most closely impact my natal chart? That's where I would start.
Okay.
Can I say something here? I've been muted. I believe in really looking at all kinds of aspects, and I also believe in time. And if you have one of these, and you want to know what's going to happen in, let's say 27, you can open it at 27 right here and find all of the data for all of the planets right there. And so if you have something that you wonder, gee, sometime down the road, I'm going to have a very big transit with, say, Uranus or someone slow moving, but you can jump ahead quickly 10 years or 5 years. I really recommend that you can get this on Amazon if you look for it. And I really believe in looking ahead to seeing where things happen. I've been following Pluto transits to my moon for some time, and other ones. So I just recommend that as kind of what I do in terms of trying to see long range things like what's going to be in 5 years or whatever. So I would suggest it'd be a good thing to think about if you might want to know that kind of information within just a flick of your thumb. You can be in, right away to 2028 or whatever if you're having
Yeah.
some kind of a worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway,
What do you guys think is going to happen between Israel and the Palestinian people?
We should look at the chart and,
Yeah, we
we-
got the charts coming up, and we'll be talking about it when we get to the charts.
hey, I just wanted to answer Connie's question. Where's the raise hand function? Traditionally, it's been in the reactions tab under your tab bar. And on my screen, I don't know if, because I'm co-hosting, there's also a new raise hand tab. And I just ask folks that if they aren't speaking to hit the mute, to mute themselves so we don't pick up your background sound.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's not, I don't have it.
Okay, I'd have to see your, Reactions or raised hand, and if you click on reactions, it should bring up an emoji or the raise hand tab. We'll see you, Connie. We have so few people. If you just literally hold your hand up like this, I will see it, or we will see it.
Okay.
Yeah. Hmm. Wish I could. I tried. Hmm. Oh, right. The Llewellyn guide. What's nice is that it does identify when the moon goes void of course and when it enters the next sign. It has, while it has a listing of retrogrades, they're also identified in the calendar dates, and it gives you the specific time of day. And it also shows what sign the planets are in at the time of the aspect. So you can tell, whether it's a waning or waxing aspect, or whether or not they might be in a sign that, where you have natal planets, or might be aspecting a natal planet, to help you kind of zero in on which ones might be more important for you personally. Okay, so here is a solar map showing the path of yesterday's eclipse. The red line was a line of totality, and of course it wasn't totally total. That was the line of ring of fire, basically. So if you were along that line, you had a really good chance of seeing the ring of fire.
But that was just for the US. Do you have ones for Central and South America too, Jim?
Yeah, I could reshape the map and do more of the map.
Or I could just mention that it was through like Guatemala, Central America, and Brazil primarily. So
Yeah,
that,
you can see where it kind of goes off the map there at the bottom of the screen. It's what is that? Nicaragua, Honduras there, I think.
yep. NASA's website has this up.
Yeah.
If you just go to nasa.com and look up eclipse, it'll bring it to you.
Yeah. NASA's got the best eclipse website there is, I think.
So
it
good.
gives you all kinds of, does animations and shows you all kinds of good information.
Yeah, it shows the times and also how the percentage of the eclipse in many regions. It's
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
accurate.
the black lines on the screen are showing where as you get farther away from that red line, the extent of the sun that is obscured decreases, and that's just showing you lesser amounts. So like where LA is, we were around like a 75% of the sun was obscured at maximum. And then you get out in the ocean or you go the other way, like you're ending into the 50 or like half or a quarter, and like you don't get it after that, really. Did anybody have glasses and go look at it?
No.
Yes.
I did.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Where do you get the glasses?
I bought some from Amazon. They were like cheap.
Okay, yeah, okay. Also,
Or you can probably find them in like drugstores, grocery stores, places like that.
I think Mel Wilson was videoing it live for us to see on their website.
Yeah. That's always good too. And then there was a viewing party, I think, up at the Griffith Observatory.
Yeah, that was
A
the
lot
other
of
one, yeah.
amateurs were up there with their telescopes, so you could watch stuff.
Yeah, Griffith Observatory. I went in 2012 for one of the eclipses. Then everybody comes out, families, science lovers, astronomy lovers.
Mhm,
Everybody
mhm.
brings pinhole cameras. And if you just go outside with a colander or a pinhole and or looking through the leaves, you could literally see many, many shadows of the eclipse all over the ground or the earth.
Yeah. I saw it once on the floor at a shopping mall because it was shining through a skylight,
Mm.
and then the floor was the area on the floor was reflective, and you could actually see the outline of the sun and the moon obscuring part of the sun.
At the last
That was
lunar
trippy.
eclipse, I don't know if we're going to see the lunar eclipse, Jim, but I could coordinate.
No.
It's like doing a meetup the next time there's a solar or lunar eclipse or a planetary occultation that's visible at Griffith Park, because it's usually a party. It's like hundreds of people And it's really lovely. It'd be nice to connect in person. So I'm glad to do that. If
Oh,
we have
that's a-
something coming up, let me know and I can coordinate.
Well, that's a great idea. Thank you.
So good, right?
Yeah. An excuse to get together.
And Griffith's
Yes.
Observatory is gorgeously amazing in the art and, at night, and we could have lunch or whatever. Just an idea.
We're so lucky
Okay.
to live near that, we're so lucky to live there, near.
Okay. Next up. Okay. So yesterday's eclipse. It was the eclipse is part of Sarah's series 134, which is also known as 7 South, if you have the Bernadette Brady book, The Eagle and the Lark. And this information comes from her book, Predictive Astrology, The Eagle and the Lark, for the eclipse of series 7 South. So the first eclipse in this family was on June 22nd, 1248. And the last one will be July 26, 2492. These repeat every 18 years and change. And there's typically 70 or so eclipses in a family. And the south and north refer to the lunar nodes. So this family of eclipses, they always occur on the south node. And basically they will start either at the south, near the south pole of the earth, and progress north and go off on the north pole, vice versa. Now the main aspect from the first eclipse was a Pluto trine the eclipse point and Mars square Pluto. So what she does is she considers that to be the predominant theme then for this whole family of eclipses. No, if you're 18, 36, 54, 72, or 90, this eclipse may have been your prenatal eclipse family. That is the solar eclipse prior to your birth. So, if you get a chance, you should try to identify the solar eclipse that occurred prior to your birth, because that's your prenatal eclipse family. And here's what she says about this family of eclipses. The immense power, anger, and force of the Mars square Pluto is channeled into this family of eclipses via the trine, that is Pluto's trine to the eclipse point. The individual experiencing this series will find that huge obstacles will suddenly and easily clear, or on the negative side, a pending potential crisis will suddenly manifest and move through his or her life very rapidly. Either way, the individual will feel that everything is moving at great speed. For those really interested in eclipses, I would recommend Bernadette Brady's book, Predictive Astrology, as being the best, because she lists them all. She talks about all of the different families of eclipses. And it's also available in Kindle for those of you who don't like to carry big, heavy books around. So here's the chart.
Thank you.
21 Libra, 8 minutes. You see the node was at 24 Libra, 52. So in order to have an eclipse, a solar eclipse, the sun has to be within basically 17 degrees of one of the nodes. Lunar eclipses, the moon has to be a little bit closer. I think it's like 13 degrees to get at least a partial. The Sabians, and one way to tell, okay, if you look at the table in the upper left-hand corner, so you can, the extreme right-hand column, declination, DECL, that shows you the degrees that the planet was above or below the ecliptic. And you'll notice that the moon, which is listed first, and the sun second, they are fairly close. There's just a few minutes of declination arc separating them. Sabian symbol, 21 Libra 8. That is the 22nd degree of Libra. Is a child giving birds a drink at a fountain. We look across, we see that, that black thing here. This is the planet. This is the minor planet Eris at 24. Notice that Eris is right on the north node. Eris was the god, is the sister of Mars, um, kind of like a goddess of war and destruction. Um, the old myth is that she would go around to the after the battles and watch over the look, check out the dead and kind of have her. That was her fun day, was going to a battlefield and walking among the dead afterwards. Um, she's also the was also the instigator of the Trojan War, and if you want to extend that into latter day fairy tales, the Sleeping Beauty, I believe it was.
Hey, Jim, can I add a piece about Eris?
Yes.
Okay, so oftentimes she's attributed in Greco-Roman mythology as triggering the Trojan War, but she was the only goddess, the sister goddess of Mars. So she's like a goddess of war that was not invited to the wedding of the gods at Mount Olympus. So she didn't start the war, but she threw a golden apple to challenge the gods with a kind of a verbal challenge, but they decided to start the war themselves. We see this,
Yeah.
yeah. So when we see the symbol of like the golden apple of Eris, Adam and Eve. Eve takes the bites from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. We see Persephone taking fruit of the pomegranate from the land of the dead. So we oftentimes see this as a misinterpretation or not a complete one,
Yeah.
because I've been tracking Eris very significantly for a while now, and we see her symbolically as anyone that's left out of the party, the people that are not, as symbolically, not just of a woman that's done a naughty thing, but as people that are not invited to the table of the gods, to the table of the corporate hierarchy. So we see this every time that there's street battles, somebody that's taking up arms to have have their civil rights protected. We saw this through the French protest, the English protest, the labor protest this year, and we've had this aspect running for a long time. So it's
Yeah.
not this really complicated. There's more to it, but definitely it's part of this directional north node
Yeah.
nation.
It is, and it's very interesting. I think I like your approach that it's the ones who have been left out.
Yeah. So
And
in
they
our
don't, yeah, they don't necessarily start things. They may provide the temptation,
yes,
and so
and it's
then it's the person who, if
yeah.
the person succumbs to the temptation, they then instigate the negative aspect.
There you go.
Those who avoid the temptation avoid the negative aspect.
Right, we're seeing this like the Armenians in Azerbaijan. We're seeing that people are caused to flee, and also it's a verbal taunt. We see this in London and England right now. You're not permitted to even do any pro-Palestinian protests, but it's occurring anyway. There's the same kind of lockdowns that are happening in France with this topic, with a Palestinian. But it's those that have been excluded. The labor, we're seeing huge strikes in the labor movement over the past year. So we're seeing this in many manifestations. And it's usually a verbal taunt that's responded to with tremendous violence or pressure.
Mm-hmm. And the thing with Eris is that um, her orbit is quite elliptical and she's quite far out. And so she moves very slowly. About half. It takes her about twice as long as Pluto, right?
Yeah, it's like a 531-year cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to
Yeah.
think about it as Pluto's being the more active, faster moving planet squaring Eris, which is sometimes difficult to wrap the brain around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the one up at 0 Gemini, that is Sedna. Sedna takes even longer. I think her orbit is what, 10,000 years or something like that?
11,400, yeah.
Yeah. But she takes even, yeah, I mean, she's got a really wide orbit. Takes her a long time. So she moves very slowly. And, my approach, it's interesting. I was always fascinated with ancient history or history in general. but once really got into astrology and started realizing that all these planets and objects had a mythological background, I became much more interested in the mythology of them. So that, you know, you look at these and I start to think in terms of the mythology of Sedna, the relationship between Saturn, Chiron, and Uranus. I mean, you got a family tree there. Uranus was the father of Saturn, who's the father of Chiron. And Chiron orbits between Saturn and Uranus at kind of like mediating, trying to make peace in the family, not always succeeding. Okay, any questions about the chart? Because the next slide.
Oh, I have one quickie one. And
Yes.
the response, sorry, I have, I love my research. Thank you for including Sedna. She's also one who has been left out, powerless. She's in the Inuit story. She's, okay, so it's trining Pluto, correct?
Yep.
Pluto trining, or Pluto trining Sedna. She's left out. She's
Yes.
the daughter of a man in the Inuit village. She can't find someone to marry. In one story, she runs off with a dog man, because she can't find someone in her village. Another story, she is married off to a stranger who turns out to be this bird-like specter. The father comes to collect her, and the storm of the sea is brewed up. A terrible raging storm occurs in the kayak. And the father, instead of paddling faster or attempting to escape, throws Sedna from the boat. Not only does he hit her with the oar, he cuts off her fingers and leaves her for dead. So there's this difficult story of those that are left behind, that's not included, left for dead, that is similar to this Eris story as well.
Yeah, and there's also then like Chiron, the theme of abandonment.
Yes, yes. And then I also wanted to tie in, Irene mentioned there was something happening in the world points. So the world points are 0 degrees cardinal. So that would have been Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, 15 degrees of the fixed, which is Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, or 22 degrees of the mutable signs, which would be, so 22 of the mutable would be Gemini. So Sedna's at Gemini. Interesting. Virgo.
You've got Jupiter at 13 Taurus, so that brings that in. 22 mutable. Neptune's at 25. That's a little wide, generally speaking, but yeah.
Do I have this correct, Jim? Do you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, what you're doing is you're using the second harmonic, which becomes 2, 4, 8, so on. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so the Sabian symbol, 21 Libra 8. So it's a child giving birds a drink at a fountain. This comes from Judith Hill's website, sabiansymbols.com. The symbol shows a giving nature, someone who usually goes out of their way to lend a hand to others or provide for the needs of people or animals, especially for those who find it hard to help themselves. Simple, unconditional gestures of giving, love, and joy that are done for others can revitalize situations beyond expectations. Dropping the "what's in it for me" attitude and adopting caring and sharing ways can bring relief to all concerned. Random act of kindness. Taking time out of your busy day in order to nourish and protect others can bring rewards far greater than you might expect. The enjoyment of nourishing simple souls, innocent reaching out, interacting with nature, water and the need for it, hydration, fountains, bird baths, moments of innocence, looking for recognition for small deeds, being condescending to others, always feeling like you're the one who has to provide, interfering with nature, naivete. So yeah, there can be a negative or a downside to it where you're actually sticking your nose in where it doesn't belong, perhaps. What I find interesting is that as our equipment to test things increases in its sensitivity, I mean, they found that plants communicate, as an example to where I'm going. if one tree gets infected with the blight, it's going to send out tree talk to others and it's around it, letting them know what's going on. Yeah, it's like you tear a leaf off or break a twig, you know, you don't hear the plant scream out in pain, but it feels it. It knows that something has happened. Good example of this, and I haven't thought about this for a long time, and I first found out, became aware of it in a book about psychic discoveries behind the Iron Curtain called Carillion photography, where with this special photographic setup, they took a leaf and they tore off part of the leaf, and when they took a picture of the leaf, you could still see the outline of the part that was torn off. It's kind of like phantom limb pain that some people who have amputations will experience. So the natural world around us is much more aware of us and our presence and what we do than we realize. Most animal species have, they communicate with each other. We can't understand them. We're not Dr. Dolittle, but they do communicate. Elephants and whales, for example, use infrasound, very low frequency sound that we can't even hear, as a means of communicating because it travels immense distances. So it's kind of like, we need to be more conscious of everything around us. All right. So here is the lunar eclipse that's coming up on October 28th for Los Angeles. And we will not see it because if you'll notice, the moon is at the bottom of the screen and bottom of the chart. It will be in the dark. It happens basically around noon, our little afternoon, our time. So we won't be able to see it. But the Sabian symbol for 5 Taurus 9 minutes, which is the 6th degree of Taurus, a bridge being built across a gorge. It didn't provide the definition or full-on explanation of that from the Sabian symbol website. Give yourself some time to think about it. You're trying to cross, now gorge is kind of like a narrow canyon. It's can be deep. As if something gets, the wider it gets, the more it becomes a canyon than a gorge, basically. So the Grand Canyon is a canyon. Devil's Gorge is a gorge. It's narrower. You find bridges across gorges. You won't find them generally across canyons because they're too wide. But it's someplace that's difficult to cross. Maybe deep, may have water running at the bottom, could be dangerous. But it's trying to connect to not necessarily diverse points because at one time they were together. But you're trying to bridge a gap of some kind, create a way of getting across, making your point, getting your point across to somebody who might disagree with you, for example. In some cases, you can sit down and you can have a discussion with people, and they may not change their minds, but they may be able to at least see your side of things, and you can see their side of things, and you can, in the end, agree to disagree. In some cases, you can forget about even trying because they're not going to hear a word you say. They are so cemented in their belief that there's nothing you can say or do to change their mind.
I hope this is a good omen for what's occurring in Gaza and Israel.
Yeah. Last headline I noticed was that I think Iran made both Iran and Hezbollah made threats, I would say, or regarding Israel. Hezbollah is primarily up in Lebanon, Syria area, so it's on the northern border of Israel. Warning Israel if they invade Gaza, that they will then attack northern Israel. And they did throw a few rocks at them, missiles earlier. They didn't really get into the fight when Hamas attacked. Iran said basically the same thing. Iran is the primary financial support for Hamas. If Israel invades Gaza, Iran is going to retaliate, so they say. So, I mean, is there, on the spectrum of potential possibilities, the most extreme would be Iran will attack Israel, and we will then, attack Iran, and Hezbollah will attack Israel, and we will blow them up again. So, on the other spectrum, it stays as a local conflict between Israel and Hamas and Gaza, and it gets resolved.
What's
Hamas
interesting?
is telling people. Pardon?
Oh yeah, what's interesting at that? Well, the other is Syria massing weapons on their border as well to respond. But what's interesting about this chart is the moon is again approaching Jupiter. The moon symbolic of the people, but also hopefully giving some kind of power in Taurus to people and the earth.
Yeah, it's bringing it down to earth, and the moon is exalted in Taurus, so
Yes, that's great.
she's strong and she may not be happy. Okay, so here's the chart for the time of the Hamas attack on Israel on last Saturday, October 7th at around 6:35 a.m. Jerusalem time. Sabian symbol for the midheaven, 13 Cancer 22, an old person facing a vast dark space to the northeast. The moon at 20 Cancer 3, a prima donna singing. For the ascendant at 12 Libra 28, children blowing soap bubbles. And for the sun at 13 Libra 37, a noon siesta. It taken in total, it kind of like suggests, or certainly supports the fact that Israel kind of got caught with their pants down. There was a surprise attack. They were not expecting the attack, and certainly not to the extent that it was. And of course, my conspiracy theorist portion of my brain says, now I wonder if the Israeli government, Netanyahu in particular, and his tight-knit circle, if they were aware of it and didn't want to warn people because they wanted something like this to happen, figuring that the casualties, it's going to be a manageable number. So I don't know. But here we see, again, we have Eris conjunct the North Node, opposing Mars at 26. So that, coming a week before the eclipse, it was even a much tighter opposition between Mars and his sister in the nodes.
And Chiron, Eris in the North Node in Aries in the 7th house of partnerships, marriage, divorce, and open enemies.
Yep.
Also, what is it? Pluto has been stationing.
Yeah.
So through this entire process, the god of war, and I also think of Pluto as Hades, as Kali, as Kotlike, all of these Kali, Durga, all of these life, death, life goddesses, where they're transformational events that really bring us to our knees. So with Pluto stationing at this moment, this is very significant. And I wanted to say in the prior chart, and in this one, I misread the degrees for the minutes. It's Sedna at 0, Gemini. She'll be drifting back and forth between Taurus and Gemini, and be in this relation to Pluto as Pluto's transiting between Capricorn and Aquarius. And Mar has her hand up.
Yes, Mar.
Hi, I wanted to say that I have read that they did have information that it was going to happen. And you can find that on the BBC website. It's was reported that they were told that there would be an attack, and I can't recall right now where that intelligence came from, but they were informed about it. So you were right about that, Jim.
Yeah, and I think I saw something that indicated maybe that they were expecting the attack, but that it would occur later in the day. But I mean, that's no excuse for you, really. That's like still not being prepared. But yeah, and I note too that we have Pluto is stationing basically on the United States, Pluto,
Yeah.
in opposition to the moon at the point this time. So you've got a cardinal grand cross.
And if looking at the houses, Pluto's in the 4th house of home and family. The moon is at the midheaven. When we're looking at traditional geopolitical cultural astrology, the moon is the symbol of the people. So the moon is high in the sky at this moment. Mercury is in the 12th house, communications.
Yep.
And 12th house is can also be interpreted as, underground, unseen. Can't be generally seen on the horizon because it's behind the hills or behind a city.
Yeah.
And it's often the planet of your own undoing, or in a geopolitical city event chart, your own undoing and unknown enemies.
Right.
Whereas the 7th house is known, open enemies, the 12th house is unknown. So
and it just brought to mind 9/11, because when they looked back at what was happening on 9/11, there were indications that something was going to happen. The problem was that the different federal security agencies had different pieces of the puzzle, and since they didn't want to talk or share, they never put the pieces together until after the fact. And so it's kind of like, we should have realized this was coming, and we should have been more prepared.
Also,
But
I'm seeing the western half of the chart. Look at it's all retrograde. It's like the west, what is setting at the Sedna, Uranus, Jupiter, Eris, Chiron, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto, all retrograde, all reflecting upon this long history, not just the past 56 years, not just since the 1930s, but 120 years of English tampering in Palestine or Philistine.
Yeah.
This is not a new struggle.
No, it's not new at all. I want to check something.
And Mars in the 1st house. It's the face of the day. So if we just look at those house, placements of those planets, it really tells a very strong story.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jim, for bringing up these amazing charts and starting this day, this conversation with this topic. Thank you.
Yeah. What chart are you seeing? What are you seeing now? Okay.
Yeah, page with the planets.
Yeah.
Just the intro page.
Okay, hang on.
Slide number
There it
1.
is. Okay, I had to get back to I was checking something. Yeah, because what's interesting is in the chart you see that the nodes are supposedly in the process of stationing.
Yeah.
The little s, but they are in fact still retrograde at this point.
Yeah.
Because I use true nodes, so they do go back and forth. There are break periods when they are in direct motion rather than retrograde. Yeah. All right. So here we go.
Oh yeah.
So
if
here's
we
the
look at that for weather ecology. We can look at the one more sec. So if we were looking at the weather of the day, we would look at the 4th house, the IC, and what planets are in the 4th house and what planets are in the ascendant, the 1st house. So we would see Pluto. We would see, its rulership of Saturn. Saturn's opposing Venus. Venus is the land, beauty, culture, the arts. We would look at the 1st house. you know, Mars in the first house, the South Node in the first house. We know this is going to be, and in square to each other. It's going to be a rotten day.
Mhm.
Just like if we just look at the very traditional workings of the chart. Thank you.
Right. And if we think in terms of waxing waning phases, it's a waning square by Mars to Pluto because it's approaching the conjunction, and which implies that this is something old that's been going on forever, moving in to begin a new cycle, which could either signify a new cycle where perhaps of resolution or a new cycle of violence. Could go either way.
Did you say a Mars Pluto waning square?
Yes.
And it's a lunar square, moon to the sun, the last third quarter. So in every calendar the world over, people use that astrology, just the lunar new moon, first quarter, full moon, and third quarter as this square of tension. So we're seeing it
Yeah.
many ways.
And yeah, and that same note, it's a balsamic Mercury. So the very, there's some definite aspects of communication that were hit unseen, unrecognized. Okay. So here's the chart for the founding of Israel, May 14, 1948, 4:06 p.m. Tel Aviv. The Sabian symbol for the midheaven 26 Cancer 28 is a storm in a residential canyon filled with valuable homes. The symbol implies that you may find yourself much deeper in situations than you had planned, but you find yourself restrained by the walls about you and the turbulence happening in and around you. The sun at 23 Taurus 40, Sabian symbol, an American Indian, human scalps hanging at his belt, writes proudly. Not exactly a colorful image. For the ascendant 24 Libra 19, the sight of an autumn leaf brings to a pilgrim the sudden revelation of the mystery of life and death.
That
Symbol implies the ability.
sorry,
Go ahead.
that Sabian symbol with 23 Taurus, the American Indian, which indicates like the native, the indigenous person, human scalps hanging at this belt. So that at the founding of Israel in 1948, the Hamas attacks were echoing direct attacks that we saw in 47, 48, like Deir Yassin, the village in the Palestinian village that was sacked by Israelis, Jewish people. And it echoes exactly the attack at the rave where 250 villagers, I mean, it's a parallel almost to the number where one village is sacked and another village is sacked, massacred. And many like that occurred in 47 and 48 and the lead up to it. Sorry to.
Got it right. So the symbol of the ascendant implies the ability or the necessity of seeing far more in simple things than most people see. And I think it's offering a solution or a way out, perhaps. But unfortunately, if people don't see it, it won't happen. And right now, it would seem that Netanyahu is fairly more conservative, old school. Spencer, what are your thoughts?
Well, I look at this and, we have Uranus nearly, and Uranus has been dancing over this and stationing at 23 Taurus. So with all the other stuff under consideration, I took one big look at that and I went, wow, they're in 8th house. This is going to be a really tough time, and there'd be a lot of unexpected things happening in the 2nd house or the 1st house, however you look at it, of death. I really was taken aback by the exactness of this planet that's so powerful. that I really just couldn't really kind of handle it. It was so difficult, and I was been looking at this for some time. As the war started out on my birthday, so I had a big party and a littler party, and it was my surprise to wake up Sunday morning and the whole thing had erupted. To me, having this thing going on with Pluto and so connected to Saturn kind of was a problem to me, because this is all in Leo. And the one thing that has happened is this particular country has been a centerpiece of activity from the time it was born, and it's had several wars in its career, and this to me was going like, oh my goodness, this is quite a problem. Now, looking at the 12th house, other people have talked about, I look at the 12th house as psychological or hidden things are going to come up, and this is in Libra, and so this is something that has to be dealt with. And Neptune is, on one hand, a very spiritual and visionary thing, and on the other hand, it can cause a lot of darkness. The one fish is going down, and so I kind of was wondering about this, and then I looked at the fact that in this chart, you have an 8th house trine to Neptune, and I had to think about that for a while. Is that had to be some kind of an aspect that would show that their dreams, under such good positive beginning, were somehow having a difficult time. And if you look at the way that these two charts interface in a dual analysis, you'll see that this is quite a situation where all of these things are set off. And it also, to me, was, we've got things going on with this, but also when you get to looking at another hand, you have this trine to Mars, and you think, my goodness, certainly a lot of energy in this problem. They thrived, they grew, they came out of nothing, they overcame invasions and attacks, and this is one of them. And on the other hand, when you look at this stuff, there are a lot of very difficult situations to deal with, and so I can't help but feel that this this is a crucial time, not only for Israel, but I think, as Jim has pointed out, Iran has a big thumbprint on all of this. And the other question you have to ask, where was the intelligence of their country? These guys have been, they've carried out events where they've gone in and challenged Iran, and they've done bombings even in Iran because of their intelligence, and picked up threats from activities going on in Iran, including dealing with their nuclear stuff. And yet here, if you follow the thing, it was all in the open. They openly experimented. They built copies of these kibbutz and how to get into them, and where the safe rooms were. So to me, I'll be very curious to see how this is a very good group of astrologers, I must say. You guys nail things very quickly, and I really think that this group we have today is really top notch. And I'd be curious to hear how they deal with this overlay between the 17th, the 7th, my birthday, the 7th, with this chart, because you're going to find a major square going on with these things with Pluto and other things. So that's all I have to say for now, but I can't wait to hear this group of excellent people that have all this knowledge of mythology and the different stories of the gods and how they all play out. So that's kind of what I have to say, but I have to say this once again, that conjunction of Uranus and the sun, there it is. And that, you know, that sun, it depends on your orb, squares the Mars. So this is something that I feel has been kind of foreshadowed by even the way that this transit, if you were looking at this transit and was aware of Israel's chart, which I wasn't hung out on this thing. I was looking at other things. I was worrying about Pluto going into Aquarius and all kinds of worries about AI and stuff. And I was, you know, really kind of caught by surprise by this, because I was much more worried about Pluto going into Aquarius and AI and all these other things. Plus, you know, we've got all this stuff going on in the United States. I was looking at the election. So these astrologers today opened this thing up, and I can't wait till we look at the overlay, because I'm sure that they'll have lots of stuff to educate me about and each other about. So that's kind of what I think right now.
Mark?
Yeah, as I previously mentioned, they did have the intelligence that this was going to happen, Spencer. And my theory is that they allowed it to happen so that they have an excuse to invade Gaza and destroy it and ruin it and create a humanitarian crisis. And really unfortunate all the way around for everybody. Whenever innocent people are harmed, it's always a terrible calamity. But really what United States should do is be the peace broker, like President Carter, who spoke out again about human rights and things like that. I'd like to see that come into fashion again, rather than just saying, they say Israel has a right to defend itself, but does that mean it has the right to offend as well? Two wrongs don't make a right. And I hate to see peasants who are just have nothing to do with anything have their houses bombed, be forced to move, be mistreated, and so forth, all with U.S. weaponry. It's a terrible situation, you know, really terrible. So I'm not sure how it's going to play out, but the fact that the U.S. chart is involved and we are at the Pluto return tells me that this is going to come back on the United States somehow. And I hope not, but it's what it looks like, because Biden is not taking the President Carter approach, which I think he should, but that's what it looks like at the moment.
Yeah, I think the Pluto placement is indicative of a crisis in the United States as well as this problem. We have a country so divided and so you know, incredibly you know, in little pockets of hate. They even have told on the news that some people won't even date a person of the opposite party that they are in. So I agree with you that it might well play with Israel, but I think even before this happened, the United States had a lot of problems in its own without having to have this additional situation come into effect.
For sure, I agree with you 100%. And by the way, my birthday's October 6th.
Great.
So we had the
Well,
same
happy
problem.
belated birthday, Libra.
Thank you.
One point, one thing I want to mention is we have Pluto at 12 Leo and Saturn at 16 Leo, and their midpoint is 14 Leo, which makes an exact T-square to the nodes, which creates then a sensitive point at 14 Aquarius. So anything transiting through 14 Aquarius is going to set that T-square off by creating a fixed grand cross. So let's see where we at. Here we go. All right.
Can I
So
make
let's talk.
Quick comment about that chart?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's really, and I appreciate you bringing in the Sabian symbols, which are using the language of a storm, human scalps, American Indians, which are, we could translate another way as indigenous people or native inhabitants, and
Yeah.
also the term pilgrim. So in 1948, so I'm like looking at the moon, Pluto. So again, we're at a Pluto nodal square, T-square at May 14th, 1948. The lead up to this was, of course, World War II. But prior to the World War, there were pogroms all over Europe that were genocidal to the Jewish community. But they brought that same kind of the term settler to Israel in founding it, but built on massacre on top of massacre of Palestinian people. So we see that as Saturn and Pluto are conjunct or nearly conjunct at this, and Saturn approaching, or Mars would have just passed over Saturn and Pluto at this time. And that was the story of this moment. But we're seeing that same incursion of Jewish settlers or Zionist settlers across what was deemed, what was supposed to be 56% of what's now Israel by Ben-Gurion's doctrines, but they ended up taking over 78% of the land. So there's, it has just set the stage for this ongoing tumultuous.
James, is this a map? I mean, a chart of the founding of Israel or the Israeli war during this time? I'm not clear on that.
It's the founding chart for Israel.
Okay.
The fighting was already ongoing, but this is the founding chart for Israel.
Right, and this is when, so the British were in control of Israel or Palestine, let me get the language right, for 30 years or more. And they literally turned the keys and the weapons over to Ben-Gurion and the Zionists to create this new state. That's when it was signed off.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't say that, well, the conception of this began with the Middle East agreement that was reached at the end of World War I with the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And yeah, the attempt of Europeans, i.e., white, predominantly white Christians, falling within the broad scope of Christian religions, to create an acceptable arrangement for non-Christian people in a land that has been fought over for 2,000 years between the people that, if you simply go with the Hebrew story, that they fled Egypt and came to what is now Israel, it was then Canaan. Yeah, they displaced the Canaanites. It's yeah, this has been going on for a good 2,000 years or more, and it's always one group displacing the other. You can bring in the Crusades. Um, yeah, and there was a period when there was peace there during the height of I don't think it was the Ottoman Empire, whatever it was at the time, where Muslims and Jews and even some Christians lived together in peace in Jerusalem because it is the holy city for all three religions. But yeah, and then one other comment I'll make. I saw something online, I don't think it was yesterday, probably the day before, where I think it was somebody from Hamas or someone affiliated with Hamas made the comment that the distinction is that the Jews love life. Hamas lives to be martyred or loves martyrdom, to that effect. So yeah, it's yeah, it's a family squabble between the descendants of Abraham from a biblical perspective. Thank you very much. It's like one hell of a family reunion.
Well, I'd like
Okay.
to say one more thing on that topic, that I blame the British because the British believe in divide and conquer, and they came into that area and they drew all of the boundaries that was there, and then decided to stick Israel in one of those boundaries, which really screwed everything up, and that's what happened. And I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Nigeria, and Nigeria was also divide and conquer. And I was there when they had a civil war. And I really feel that if you understand the way they settled the First World War and how they divided that whole area up, Iraq and these things are all kind of arbitrary boundaries created by the English. The whole thing now is that there's a lot, like look at the Caribbean, they still had all these people there. Now they're saying get out, and when Prince William showed up, they said get out of here, you're British. It's enough of myself on the British, but that's where I raise my hand.
I'll throw in my 2 cents worth about the British since I have some British ancestry. Just going back to the time of Victoria, when the British Empire was at its maximum, the sun never set on the British Empire. And Queen Victoria, grandmother of Europe, whose offspring started World War One. And then if you look at how after World War One and primarily after World War Two, how the dissolution of the British Empire, what happened in India? Well, let's see. India was included what is now Pakistan and Bangladesh, but because Pakistan, what is now Pakistan and Bangladesh were predominantly Muslim populations, they split them off. So you had East and West Pakistan. And then you look at Africa, and the British had their system. And once the British basically gave up control and stepped back, how most of these areas went through a very difficult period of time of conflict, trying to reestablish their own identities. So you had, civil wars and tribal wars in Africa. You had the conflict in India and Pakistan, and apartheid in South Africa, which a lot of that traces back to the concept of colonialism in Europe, which the British maximized. Okay, on to our primary topic. This was our topic for the day when we first started the idea, and that is solar arcs and secondary progressions, which are two of the primary timing techniques in predictive astrology. Now, they're both based on what is really a prophetic premise of a day for a year. One interpretation of some of ancient prophecies is that when the prophet would say something in terms of so many days, you could also take that as meaning so many years, a day for a year. And they're so both solar arc and secondary progressions are based on the prophetic, that principle of a day for a year. Now, in the New King James Version of the Bible, in describing the siege of Jerusalem in Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 6, it says, "And when you have completed them, lie again on your right side. Then you shall bear the iniquity of the house of Judah for 40 days. I have laid on you a day for each year." So there's kind of like the basis, the concepts of solar arc and solar progressions being a day for a year. So the solar arc, sometimes referred to as directed solar arc or solar arc directions, or it could be abbreviated, I abbreviated SA for solar arc. Everything moves at the same rate as the sun. So if you look at a chart and you see its basic shape, the configuration of where everything is, under solar arc progression, they all move together as one unit at the same rate as the sun, which is about a degree per day or a degree per year by solar arc. So 1 day equals a year of life. So secondary progressions, which is SP or 2P, everything moves at its own rate. But again, it's 1 day equals 1 year of life. And I think what's important is that you get this idea in your mind that 1 year by progression or arc is simply one degree movement. So that half a degree of movement is 6 months. Now, if you think in terms of what happens within a year. Okay, the moon will go around the zodiac 12 times. Mercury, Venus, Mars, most planets move a lot. All of them move on an average, more than 1 degree per year. But the sun, so you're thinking in terms of timing, from a timing standpoint. So in comparing the two, solar arc versus secondary arc, again, the timing, it's 1 degree equals a year, or half a degree equals about 6 months of time. So they both have the same concept, a day for a year. But under solar arc, everything moves at the daily rate of the sun, which is slightly less than, on average, slightly less than a degree. Where in secondary progressions, everything moves at its own daily rate. The chart shape will not change in a solar arc, but the chart shape will change in secondary progressions. The aspect between solar arc planets doesn't change in a solar arc, but the aspect between secondary progressed planets may change. Under solar arc, planets never change direction, they never go out of bounds. But under secondary progression, they may change direction. They may station direct, station retrograde, and they may go out of bounds. Now, in both cases, aspects to natal planets may move into and out of orb. But again, thinking in terms of the timing, because simply 1 day by solar arc is 1 degree or 1 year in time, you need to use small orbs. The orbs for the lights, the sun and the moon, the natal or transits, you should try starting with 1 degree. You may find that you can go a little bigger than that. For the other points, you would start with 1 degree and maybe then need to go smaller. Mercury and Venus can move pretty fast, so they'll transit the zodiac pretty much every year. So, but try to keep in mind from a timing standpoint what you're really seeing. So, for example, okay, Mar, you just had a birthday. Convert your age in years to degrees, and then you simply move everything that many. For a solar arc, you simply move everything that many degrees forward. Now, the interesting thing is that you'll find that a solar arc sun and the secondary progressed sun will always be in the same spot. they're identical because they're moving at the same rate. So let's take a look. So on the left, we have Israel's solar arc chart for October 7th of 23, the date of the Hamas attack. On the right, we have the secondary progress chart. So if you remember, we had a Pluto-Saturn conjunction. They were basically 4 degrees apart. Pluto was 12 Leo and Saturn was 16 Leo. You see that they're still basically 4 degrees apart. The moon was 8 degrees from Pluto. It's still there. So that relationship of the planets in the solar arc doesn't change. Their position changes, but they maintain that same relationship. Okay. The moon will never conjunct Pluto. Mercury will never conjunct Uranus. Nobody will cross the nodes. All that stays the same. And you'll notice that none of them are considered retrograde because there is no retrograde concept in solar arcs. You look across to the other chart, the secondary progress chart, and you can see how things have shifted. You no longer have that Saturn-Pluto conjunction. There's now about 9 degrees between them. Now, 48, from May of 48 to October 23 is about 75 and a half years, or about 75 and a half degrees. So where the sun was at 23 Taurus, it's now at 5 Leo. And you can see it's at 5 Leo 45 in both cases. So that, are you getting the idea of what's happening here? Because in the solar arc, everything moves together as a single unit. Where in the secondary progressed, everything moves based on its own movement. So you'll see that Uranus hasn't moved very far. Pluto hasn't moved very far. Even Saturn hasn't moved very far. So the outer planets don't move that much. Neptune's still at 10 Libra. But the other guys, they start moving more because it's been 75 and a half days in real time. So literally the secondary progress chart is based on the ephemeris for 75 and a half days roughly after May 14th of 1948. Are you with me, folks? Did I
Yes.
lose you?
No.
Yes, we're awake. We are here.
Okay. All right. Let's take a look. All right. So here we have a biwheel with the Israeli chart on the inside and their solar arc chart for the time of the Hamas attack on the outside. Okay. So you can see, you can better visually see that the relationship of the planet stays the same. It's just like you just turn the wheel. Now, one of the things that jumped out at me was that the solar arc sun is at 5 Leo 45. The natal moon was at 4 Leo 25. So that's a difference of basically a degree and 20 minutes. Which in a time frame, since the sun moves, since we're doing a degree for a day for a year, that 1 degree is going to be 12 months. That third of a degree is going to be about 4 months. So it's probably about 16 months ago, Israel had a solar arc, the equivalent of a solar arc new moon. That is, a solar arc sun was on the natal moon, symbolizing a new beginning. And then you just kind of like start looking to see what else jumps up and jumps out at you in terms of what other aspects are we making between the solar arc chart and the natal chart.
Well, Pluto is right on the ascendant. That's kind of a big clue.
Yep.
This is Irene. The other thing I'm noticing in terms of an aspect pattern, I believe it may be called a hammer or the finger of the world or something, but you have the square between solar arc Jupiter and their natal Mercury, the 5th and the 8th house, and they're both sesquiquadrate to the ascendant. And so really what that means is that point, their ascendant, they're taking us, swings between the 5th and the 8th house. And I think that solar arc Jupiter is setting it off.
Yeah. When you have Pluto there to add to it, and you'll
Yep.
notice how the solar arc nodes are now aligning with the Israeli natal MCIC axis as well.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Now let's
and
take
then-
a look. Right. Anything else?
Well, I was gonna say, that's not an exact situation yet, between, Mercury square, Jupiter, and that's an excellent thing to point out, that Mercury is suddenly in the 8th, and the 5th, and you have to realize that if you follow, Jim's interpretation of how things work, this is going to grow, and of course, most different orb aspects will look at it from that point of view. But I think that the Mercury being squared by the Jupiter, which is supposed to be this expansion god, it's a god of religion. It's a god of the way that we even anticipate how we might govern and structure the way we happen, especially in the 5th house. That's a very good point to point out. I just want to point out that Jupiter's not done doing
Oh.
this.
No, it's a degree off, so it's still approaching Mercury, right? So it's
It's about 7 months from exact.
yeah.
And but also then when you look at it this way, with the outer ring moving, those being the applying planets and the inner ring stationary, this is actually a 3rd quarter waning square, which is suggestive of bringing something to a conclusion or at least a new beginning. So where are we? October 10 and 17 is 5, isn't it? Yes, so somewhere around Israel's 76th birthday next year, it will be exact. And if that's a new beginning, then what is it going to be? I mean, there seems to be that we saw some other indications of potential new beginnings. And so there is that unknown, because you don't know what the new beginning will be. I mean, are we looking at, World War III Armageddon, or are we looking at a new period of relative stability and peace? I don't know, or something in between.
Well, I
'cause
think
this
with the malefics right there, bang on, Pluto at the ascendant. We think of Pluto as a contemporary or modern malefic, and Saturn and Mars as the traditional malefics, the identity or the 1st house of.
Mhm.
It's clearly described the reputation of the
Yes,
planet.
and we have that nice soft trine from the natal Uranus to Pluto. Pluto's moved past the exact point, which is encouraging, but does that mean it's going to be a soft, unexpected landing? That perhaps the unexpected will be that there will be peace, or the soft aspects aren't always soft.
No, I
They're
don't think of-
deceptive in that way.
right. I don't think like a Uranus Pluto trine as I think it's easy, like it's an easy disaster.
Well, yeah.
I
Yeah.
just the more I practice astrology, the more I just literally translate, that's an easy disastrous death. Uranus
Yeah.
Pluto. Like literally break it down to a very simplified Parson diagram of the sentence of astrology, of the grammar.
Yeah.
And that's what it's turned out to be this entire week.
Well, in his book, Solar Arcs, Frank Clifford would disagree with that because he says he looks at them as kind of fluffy. They're kind of there, but it's the hard aspects that you want to really put your money on for having a strong effect.
But does Frank Clifford discuss that in terms of personal charts, individuals, or that of political charts and nations?
As far as I can tell, and I remember, I think he does some thought about them, but I think that the concept of a hard aspect versus a soft aspect should not be overlooked, but it also shouldn't be estimated. That's my feeling, and the way that I've dealt with this with some success. Clifford in his book announces that he looks and prefers this as the progression that he looks to be most accurate. When I was with Mary in March, she didn't even look at soft angles. So it's I agree with you with your pointing out the trine, but you have to also consider the power that's going on with the conjunction. And I think that he's also much more involved with giving you where it's accurate. The point of exactness, he gives a half a degree to on each side. So it's I suggest you take a look at his book. I have it here somewhere.
Yeah, I know his work. I think those of us living with these kind of aspects and observing them politically, geopolitically, I think those planets in conversation through any aspect are significant.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
I think what happens is that we can lose something or underestimate something when we translate from the personal to the mundane, the geopolitical mundane. Because the other thing I'm noticing too is the solar arc Mars is about just over 2 degrees from an exact first quarter waxing crisis of action square to Pluto. So that's probably just over 2 years away. So we may see a waning of the tension only to have it erupt in a couple of years, probably around the, let's see, this 2025, around the end of 25, early 26.
Well, I
Yeah.
want just to build on that for a moment. What I wanted to mention is that Mars around the same period is going to hit that south node, right? So at the same time that it's going to hit,
It's not quite 4 years from the south node by solar arc.
but it's coming, right? Same thing with
Yes.
Pluto, Pluto square. And I'm wondering if in a few years' time, they're going to need to maybe give something up in order to move forward and get out of the plutonic situation that
Yeah,
they're in.
that's a distinct possibility. It could be that we're looking at something that will, another war, if you would, maybe hopefully on a small scale, coming at late 25,
But
that
Mercury,
will then reach some resolution probably within 1 to 2 years after that.
but
You
Mercury
have that
squares the sun.
Yeah.
Mercury squares the sun, and it's going to be involved in this situation for quite a while. It's not going to like evaporate just because it's not exact. It will develop and still go on within a degree, the way I look at it, and the success I've had in using it.
There, yeah.
But
Yes,
but still the whole idea of the 10th house square, the 8th house, that changes that are going to be desired. And the economic problems, if you look up on the 8th house as having some kind of economic significance, is going to have to be really, because this is going to be expensive any way you look at it. And then
Yeah.
also a lot of death. So
Mhm.
it's going to me be a very rough bump for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, because then let's see where we.
That's so interesting, Spencer, that you brought in the idea of this is going to be very expensive. And I want to tie it in with the concept of what Marr was bringing in the United States as the more recent global colonial power intervening. Most of the motivations of the US being involved are financial. The weapons industry is certainly motivating the many choices, as not just one warship from the United States has pulled in, but a second has pulled into the Bay, that region.
Well, I agree with drew up boundaries for Iraq and just went in when they had no mass production. Eisenhower told us to watch out for this. And I think Katrina, you're absolutely right. This is a problem that, do you even know where they build tanks? And I know where Chrysler and BMW has a plant in the South. Where do they make tanks?
Well, they make warships and weapons here in Southern California and also in Colorado.
And in Maryland.
Right. Wherever they can. And this ties into this 1948. The British pulled out of Palestine because they were at the end of their rope financially after the Second World War, whereas the United States, although they lost men and supplies, they certainly came out as bandits, as war industry tycoons.
Well, I'm looking at some other points in the chart as we move and moving them along by time frame. So Chiron is less than about a year from opposing the natal moon, 4th to 10th. Jupiter is less than a year from making a 3rd quarter square to Mercury. And so you see, everything is, we look at the aspects that are closest now, but we got to keep in mind too that as we start thinking in terms of time frames of 2 years or 3 years, all of a sudden other things are starting to come into play. 4 years, in less than 4 years, Mars will be on the south node. What else is happening? Well, let's see. The solar arc midheaven
Neptune.
goes over Neptune.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. 4 years, 9.
Neptune coming to oppose Uranus, I believe, and within the next 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, and this idea of fantasy dream of having a Zionist nation, and then eventually to that Jupiter, and of course Jupiter at sextiling Pluto, and Saturn.
And it's only a few months before the nodes switch from 3.9 to 4.10. And actually cross over the ICMC axis.
Yeah.
7/21, not 4 months. So yeah, everything is moving, everything is and so that's where the solar arc can really help you zero in on things, because then you start to get a picture of the sequence of things that are happening from an astrological archetype, and how then might they play out in real life.
Well, the other thing I'm seeing is a corporate, war industry driven media news versus independent media. There's all these strange lockdowns on pro-Palestinian protests in England and France, but simultaneously all over the world, pro-Palestinian, pro-human rights, I hate to say it, but pro-life, and protest all over Europe, all over the United States, Canada, Mexico, Central America, South America. Tremendous public response. certainly all over the Middle East and all Arab nations in Jordan and Iraq and Afghanistan and North Africa. The people are responding vociferously. Jordanians marched to the border and they were pepper sprayed and tear gas was used so they couldn't open their own borders. So, and unusual about what's happening with Egypt, that they aren't opening their borders. Oh, I'm just want to tear my hair out about that.
Yeah, that just reminded me of something I saw on the news yesterday, where the governor of Texas is now what did he send his National Guard over to build a wall, a wire barrier between Texas and New Mexico running north from El Paso?
Oh God.
Well, he didn't want those immigrants, those illegals crossing over into New Mexico and then just hopping across the border into Texas, coming into El Paso. So I'm not sure how long a wire wall he wants to build or whatever kind of wall he's building, but they can walk faster than he can build the wall. But yeah, I know it's becoming absurd in the world, and the United States is really getting crazy weird.
We don't have a
Okay.
Speaker of the House.
Mhm.
That's how weird it is.
Yeah. Right. So here's the secondary progressed chart compared to Israel based on the same day. So we have the Israel chart on the inside, October 7th, secondary progress chart on the outside. So again, day for year, moving it, but everything moving at its own rate. So now what do we see to add to what's going on? Well, we see that the sun is still in that same spot, 545 Leo, degree 20 past the moon. We now see that Pluto's only moved 2 degrees, Saturn has gone 7 degrees, Neptune is still at 10. So basically, during that period, what's happened is when Israel was formed, Neptune was retrograde. And in the 75 years or 75 days since then, Neptune stationed, went direct, and it's still at 1035.
Right. The dream is still the same.
Mm-hmm.
The Zionist, agenda. Go ahead.
Yeah, the slow moving points change very little by secondary progression.
Mhm. Slow moving planets, rather.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But notice the nodes. Now they're at 9.
9 and 14. So what's moved
Yeah.
along? Mars has moved from the 11th to the 12th house of, more secret enemies, unknown
Right.
enemies, and our own undoing.
Now we see the moon is at 2 Taurus. Now, by secondary progression, because the moon moves faster, it's going to be an average rate of slightly more than 13. Its average rate of motion is just over 13 degrees a day. So where the sun moves 1 degree per year, the moon might move 13 degrees per year. So basically, it takes just over 27 years or 27 days for the moon to complete a complete revolution and return to its real position. So it takes about 27 days and a change, or by secondary progression, 27 years and change, for the moon to go from 4 Leo back to 4 Leo. Or 29 days if you're looking for the return to the lunar phase that we had.
So it's a lunar square.
Yeah.
The square, moon squares the moon, and moon's shifted to the 7th house again of divorce and open enemies. I mean, in this case, Israel is counting the people of
Mhm.
Palestine as the enemy.
Yeah, so here when you're looking at the moon in a secondary progress, think in terms of a degree per month.
Mhm.
It's got to move a little more than that, but that's a good figure. So where you see the moon at 2 Taurus and the north node at 9 Taurus, 6, 7 months, around about 7 months, the moon will transit the north node by secondary progression. Okay. The sun's at 23 Taurus, so that's 21 degrees difference. 24. So there will be a progressed new moon that is a progressed moon to natal sun new moon in a bit less than 2 years, symbolizing again another new beginning in that 2-year time frame.
And Mars coming to oppose Eris within the year.
Yeah. See, Mars moves at the rate of average of around a half to 3/4 of a degree per day. So it takes Mars longer. It moves slower than the sun. So to move the 3.5 degrees from where it's at to Neptune, let's see, 180, 210, probably could be 5 years, 4 or 5 years, 5 years, maybe a little longer before we have a Mars. Secondary progress Mars can jump natal Neptune. And if you have an astrology program where you can actually animate that outer ring, you can actually pinpoint the exact dates when these things will happen.
But could I ask, we kind of glossed over the moon square moon. How do people interpret that kind of a square? I'd like to know your opinions about that, because it's
Yeah.
not going to be there for a long time, but it's going to be there for a while.
Well, I think that's why I kept bringing in the protests, like who's protesting the world over. And there are Jews within Israel that have been protesting the government all year. And also that are protesting this Gaza invasion and the murderous massacre that's happening. So people opposing the people, but there are also settlers and Zionists that are being armed with, heavy ammunition that are killing off local people and Palestinians in Gaza, and also in the West Bank rather. So, and then so much tension, the tension with the people from Jordan, from Egypt, from Syria, from Lebanon, from Hezbollah, from, like people conflicting with people. Taurus, Leo, fixed signs, earth, fire. It's a habubi. A habubi is a dust storm in Arabic.
Yeah.
And that moon of Israel in Leo, and I would say that there's going to be a big emotional, like you have said, there's going to be a big emotional attack on the very concept of how we look at this concept of Israel being some, as you pointed out, the protests, even in New York City, it seems to me like you're absolutely right that this is going to be an emotional explosion in
Right.
the next, and I worry about this. I can't see what's going to happen when we watch all these bombs drop and people's apartments and buildings are destroyed, and they have no place to come back to. And Hezbollah will march all the babies that have died out in front of the screen. Katerina, you're absolutely right.
The moon, but the moon is also, it's the people, but it's also the motherland. And I think it's the necessary emotional reaction that we have to have as a global people. We have to have this response that we can't massacre and condone any massacre, any genocide, any murderous action, any stealing of land. And that goes for the land that we're living on right now.
Yeah,
The Sabian symbols that Jim brought up, the pilgrims, the native peoples, we're living on under the same genocidal history. So we have to come to terms with those things as well.
right.
And Irene has her hand.
And then there's Ukraine.
Let me just lower my hand. So what I wanted to mention is the secondary progressions do take about 27 years or so to complete. So this would mean that the progressed moon, which is at 2 degrees in the seventh house, it's in the closing square. So in essence, that the story that started about 21 years ago, this is the final quarter of it. So as we reach that final quarter, whatever seed got planted, 20 plus years ago, is being revisited, and that story's got to wrap up before the new one can get going. So and I think that ties back into what we were seeing with the solar arc directions with the Mars, the Pluto, the South Node. It's all being timed and around the same period. So I don't, and as we can see, they're not necessarily doing a new playbook right now from an emotional standpoint, and that the moon rules their 10th house too. They're standing in the world. So they're reacting to things the way that they've always reacted. And I'm thinking maybe in a few years' time, they'll try to find another way.
Something else that I spotted too is that when the secondary progressed moon is making that waning square to the natal moon, it's also making a waning sextile to Venus in the 9th house. Both the natal moon and Venus are at 4.
And that rules the ascendant. So
Yep.
yeah, there's something about their like national identity, their standing, that really it's I feel it's getting touched off in a big way.
Yeah, and we're less than 2 months from that. So this is going to be happening as we get close to the end of the year.
Now, Jim, you said that the progressed moon is going to conjunct the sun. At what time? You gave a
I'm looking at about bit less than 2 years. So sometime mid 25, I would guess.
Yep. Has this progressed moon for other astrologers in the Zoom? Have you seen this as being an extraordinary lucky time, or truly a time of new beginnings, or just another transit? I mean,
It can be a new beginning, something new, or it can simply be it's kind of like going up a spiral staircase. You're back at the same point where you started, but you're, a level higher. Each year you're a level higher. So hopefully, we've evolved. The process of evolution can be reflected that way by the progressed moon. But not everybody evolves. Not everything evolves. I mean, think about it. The conflicts between these various groups, the Kurds and the Turks and the Armenians and the Palestinians and the Jews and the Muslims. I mean, this stuff has been going on for, in some cases, maybe 2,000 years or even longer. I mean, we look at, the things that are going on over in, like with the Adriatic area, because, it seems relatively, with the destruction or the breakup of Yugoslavia, various ethnic groups created their own little countries, and they still at times, you know, get mad at each other. It's kind of like, your grandfather stole, my great grandfather's sheep, and I'm still mad at you. The sheep's dead and go on. Give it a rest. But yeah, it's Angie. Jump in.
I would say that to answer Spencer's question, the progressed new moon, with the moon conjunct the sun, is hugely, hugely monumental. It's a earth-shattering event that only happens in people's lives about 3 times in people's lives. So you can look at it as like chapter 1, act 1, act 2, act 3. There's significant changes in people's lives when that happens. I know because when I worked with a client, she's going through huge life changes, and she was having all this like sun and moon by declination, by progressed new moon, all kinds of things happening in her chart, all to reinforce that fact. So I would say that happens only happens probably like 2 to 3 times in people's lives, in their productive years. And then in a mundane chart, I think this is huge for them. It's going to be a new chapter. What the past, it's going to be rewritten. So it's whether for good or for bad. But Israel's a strong country, so it's likely going to be a different chapter written somehow.
What happened to your client when she went through this? Did her problems start to resolve?
It's I would say like and I could see that as well psychically. Actually I did the psychic before I did the astrology. It was divorce, completely career change, everything. Had been married to the same person the whole life. It was just radical. And I said, I told you, can you feel it? Yeah, she says, I can definitely feel it. She's like jumping off the wall.
Wow.
So whether somebody changes or not, they may not psychologically change, but it's a different chapter. They may go off and live in a different country when they've lived in the same country for their whole life, for example. It can be complete career change, I don't know. It's monumental. That's what I'll say.
Okay.
Which reminded me of something else, and that is that the movement of the progressed moon around a chart is basically the same time-wise as a transiting Saturn. So,
yes, Saturn returns and progressed moon returns are huge things in people's lives.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and sometimes the two, because they're moving at essentially the same rate around the zodiac, they can get locked into a particular an aspect which can carry for many years. Could be a conjunction, a square, a sextile, a trine, opposition, and that period, because of the way it's happening, it tends to be, I mean, obviously it's more of a life type event, and as such, but because of the way it's happening, it's something that that most people are unaware of. They may feel as if something is out of sync. And they may get a feeling that this is really a tough time. Why am I having such a tough time? And in trying to come up with an explanation for why it's been going on for so long, the answer may lie in looking for that Saturn progressed moon dance, as I call it.
And Saturn and the moon naturally have this relationship with each other.
Mm-hmm. see, I'm curious. Now I'm curious. Here we go. So yeah, let's see. Mhm. Okay. All right, so there we go. Let's look at our next chart. Now we're looking at a tri-wheel. And this then takes natal Israel on the inside, their solar arc in the middle, and the actual transits as of that October 7th in the outer wheel. And this adds that third element in identifying or helping to identify significant points, what or explanations perhaps or rationale behind what happened at that point in time. And this plays in part, I don't know how many. I remember when I first started studying, one of the things that was pointed out to me was called, as I recall, it was called like the astrology rule of three. Anything that's, in order for something promised in the natal chart to transpire, it has to be shown at least 2 other times. Be shown 3 times. So here, transiting Eris is in the 7th house of open enemies, conjunct the North Node, in opposition to solar arc Pluto and the transiting South Node, which is on solar arc Pluto. So this kind of reinforces something happening at this given point in time. Because in a couple of hours, the houses are going to shift. Those positions of those points won't really change much, but the houses they're in will shift. If it had occurred, an hour earlier, or even a few minutes earlier, they would have been, it would have been 6-12, not a 1-7 opposition.
Well, the Pluto square Saturn, the center one is the natal and the outside is the transit. Okay.
So now we look, let's see. So what we've done is we've simply taken that previous chart of the natal Israel with their secondary progression, and we've thrown in the actual transits for that point in time into the outer wheel. So transiting moon had just gone over natal moon, as had transiting Mercury. Transiting sun went over the secondary progressed moon about 4.5 days earlier, 5 days prior to. Keep in mind that the outer wheel is the actual transits as they're moving on a day-to-day basis. So the sun moving at about 1 degree, so it's like 5 days prior. This is with the eclipse. I'm sorry. So this is the outer ring is the eclipse, but this is like just a few minutes after the eclipse. At 21, just before the eclipse. Why did I use that time? I don't know. So this is like, shortly before the eclipse. And we can see how that eclipse kind of lays into the actual chart of Israel and the progressed solar arc planets.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think it's good that you use the eclipse because that's traditionally, for how many thousands of years since Babylonian astrology, this predictive point.
Yeah.
Like we could look at it was the week before the Mars Pluto square, but we're looking at the next step in that cycle at this eclipse, which has brought many more deaths and many more injuries to the people of Gaza and the West
Yeah.
Bank.
Yeah.
And more deaths to Israelis and more deaths to the hostages. Eris,
Right.
Eris. Pluto, Pluto,
Yeah.
Pluto.
Yeah. And we see that the actual eclipse itself occurred in Israel's 12th house.
Yes.
And
Mercury,
then
it was this emissary between the living and the dead.
Okay. Right, I may want to change it. Well, okay, so here's the secondary progress chart for the time of the attack. And at the time of the attack, the transiting sun was on Israel's secondary progress midheaven. We see that secondary progress Pluto is on the midpoint of the natal Pluto Saturn midpoint. The transiting moon is conjuncting the secondary progress Mercury in the 9th house, conjunct the midheaven. Yeah, we've got Eris and the North Node by transit in the 7th house.
Mars squares the midheaven.
Yeah, you get Mars squaring the midheaven in the 1st house. We have Pluto in the 4th house conjunct the IC. Transiting Saturn's in the 5th house. And then out of sign opposition to Israel's natal Mars.
5th house ruling children. So many have been killed.
Let's see, Neptune's at 25.
Well, ruling children, love, pleasure, creativity, the arts, everything. The department of joy. Saturn comes to visit.
Yeah. The eclipse point actually makes a semi-sextile to Israel's natal Chiron, 21 Scorpio. So, okay, so I want to kind of, it's almost 2:30. So I want to kind of like skip along here. I'll show you what else we have in the slideshow. I will be uploading the slideshow to our Facebook page. And if you're not part of Facebook or you'd like me to just send it to you personally, just drop me an email. And unless I lose track of it, I will send you the slideshow. I'm going to go back and change this slide. I don't know why I use that odd time so that it's you see the actual eclipse in the outer wheel, not just a few hours before the eclipse.
Yeah.
Okay. So, we ran out of time. So we didn't get to Fannie Willis, who's the Fulton County District Attorney, charged Trump, and that was in charge of the grand jury that indicted Trump and his 18 co-conspirators for under the RICO Act. But here's a little information about her background. When you start looking at solar arcs and secondary progressions for yourself or for a client, what you want to do is try to identify significant dates in their life that happened, so you can look at what was going on at that point in time to get a better sense of how these things play out for that person. There should be meaningful things happening. You know, she graduated from Howard University in poli-sci on May 8th of 93. There should be something significant there. May 96, she graduated from Emory Law School. Should be something significant there. September 29th, 2014, she became the lead prosecutor in the Atlanta Public Schools cheating scandal. Interesting, 12 of the defendants were charged with violation under the Georgia RICO law. Basically, what happened was, in order to raise the test scores for Georgia, some teachers and administrators, I guess, in a school or schools took the test results that students did and they changed them to give them higher scores to raise it, so that it looked like they were doing a better job than they really were teaching. Interesting, yeah.
Real quick, I gave you this birth date and it was slightly dirty data, although there was
Yep.
some postings on Facebook about her birthday at this time.
Yeah.
But I wondered if you had any luck finding if this was accurate or not.
I found this from a website. I don't remember which one it was. I don't know. I don't think it was Wiki. I think it was something else where it came up with this. This is her birth date, but yeah.
I saw it a couple
So that's
times.
the best I've got so
Me too.
far.
Hey, I don't know if you have another slide about her life, but
Yeah.
Do you?
No.
Okay, so the really important fact of her biography is, first and foremost, her father was a Black Panther. Did you know that?
Yeah.
Okay, so Black Panther, she was born in Inglewood, but was raised partially in Washington, D.C. Her mother and father divorced. The father was a prosecutor. So while she was in elementary and high school, and then they moved to Atlanta, she was doing legal research with her father, learning how to be an attorney. So this is tremendous, and I'm sure we'll see it in her chart, more in her chart. Those are some of the really fascinating facts.
Yeah. So so the thing is to look for those dates, because then they can help then to give you a better sense of that, of yourself or that person, and so that when you look at what's happening now or what may happen as you look forward into the future to see what will happen, it gives you a sense then of how that may play out in their life. So here's her natal chart. This is based on a noontime. I use noontime because it splits the day in half. So the only thing that's going to move a lot, I mean, obviously all of the angles and house custom wouldn't change, but the only other planet that might move a lot is the moon. So I always pay attention to how fast the moon is moving.
Mm-hmm.
The little chart table in the upper left-hand corner shows the moon was traveling at 13 degrees, 30 minutes, which is 13.5 degrees per day. So that means 6:45, one way or the other. But nothing else is moving that much. You know, Venus, Mercury, they're moving a little more than a degree, as they are wont to do at times. But if you go down, you'll see like Eris is retrograde, moving at the rate of 34 seconds of arc per day, which is approximately half a minute, or and a minute is 1/60th of a degree, or 1/360th, or whatever. The math is, it's not in my head right now. But then here's a bi-wheel with her natal and her solar arc. Another bi-wheel. This has got the secondary progressed on the outside. And then here's some stuff for Letitia James, and I hope my slides aren't out of order. She's the New York prosecutor for the Trump Organization Financial Fraud. Here's her natal chart. This is her tri-wheel for the date that the trial began. showing her natal, her progress, her solar arc, and the transits. And here's the same thing with her secondary progressed on the inside. I would, yeah, you might want to, when you're using a tri-wheel, it can get pretty, as you can see, it gets pretty fuzzy because you don't see any aspect lines, so you have to find them yourself. So you might want to limit your points a little bit to start with, and you might want to just do the natal and solar arc or progression first in a bi-wheel, and then add the transits to reinforce it. Because it should, if something's happening, it should show up either with solar arc or by secondary progression. Once you see it there, then add the transits to reinforce it. And then John Lumen Smith is the one that's doing the federal prosecution on the election interference.
AKA Jack Smith.
Yeah, AKA Jack Smith. Here's his natal chart. His tri-wheel solar arc, his tri-wheel progressed. I recommend using secondary progression NABOD in right ascension because the angles come out right then. There are different methods of doing secondary progressions. Something you can try for yourself. Here's a list of some books. The Solar Arc Handbook, Frank Clifford, that Spencer referred to. Assortment of things that I have accumulated over the decades. Part of my, I don't know, 700 or 800 astrology books and things that I've got. And some possible websites. SabianSymbols.com for finding out more information about the Sabian symbols. Astro, great resource for just basic information, charts, all kinds of charts, and other even more advanced information. Astroseek.com does some interesting things. Check it out. You can actually go in there and it'll do a wheel showing the retrogrades. It'll plot the retrogrades for the planets on a wheel. So you'll see where, Mars goes retrograde, it starts here, goes back to here, ends there, and then goes forward for the course of a calendar year. And then, of course, NASA for eclipses. Oops. Oh, thank you, everybody. Next month, we're still going at the idea that the open mic astrology, so we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. I have gotten some responses from people about some potential topics for the future. So
Maybe we can talk about the Fonnie Willis a little bit then, if people are interested.
yes, and we can talk about more about Willis, and by then we'll have a little better idea what's going on with all the indictments and stuff, and we might look a little more into them.
Yeah,
December 10th, we're looking at our forecast for 24. If you get a chance, check out the April 8th, 2024 total solar eclipse. It will be going, it does an arc across the United States, but it goes the other way. It comes up, seems to come up through Texas and then around Texas and then arcs towards the northeast. But it will be partially visible, at least from here. The video will be sent out when it's available. The PDF is available to anybody who wants it. Give me a couple of days to make a couple of corrections that I want to do here. I'll post it to Facebook, or you can email me and I'll send it to you.
That was excellent, Jim. Thank you so much for making available these charts and this discussion regarding Gaza, the Palestinian events, and Irene and Angie for being such diehards. And
yay!
Even if we can't see
Thank you for showing up and for sticking with us.
Yeah,
Okay.
even if we can't see the lunar eclipse, it would be cool to do a gathering, regardless, whether it's like a hike to, or meeting up at Griffith Observatory, or they actually have full moon parties. So I can find out the info and set something up and post it on Facebook.
Great.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Better run.
For those of you who are still here, this is Cornelia Hansen. Has been working on a new chart, a different chart for the birth chart for the United States.
Right.
She's done a lot of research on it. She's done a lot of charts and stuff. And at some point in the future, she may want to do a little presentation to some people to see what and to get their feedback on her investigation and what she's found. Now, since those of you diehards that are still here, Mar, Angie, Irene, Katharina, you're all solid, good astrologers. Would you be interested in participating then?
I would love to help Cornelia with her research, of course.
Yeah, so she's pretty much got the research done. Right now she's writing the book, and I think she's planning for around the, yeah, I'm not sure what time frame she's looking at. It'll be sometime next year when
Mhm.
she'll feel she might be ready with, a presentation in terms of going through some of the charts she looked at and some of her rationale and how she arrived at the conclusion she did. So, okay, Irene, Angie, are you in for this?
Yep.
Thumbs
I'm
up.
in.
All right.
I'm
How
in.
about you, Mar?
Yeah, I'm
Guys.
interested. I don't know how I could contribute, but I'm interested if I could be helpful.
Yeah, it's just a matter of looking at it from an astrological point of view and offering any insights, questions, whatever may come up. Because you
Okay,
seem
why
to know
not?
what you're. Yeah, okay. Because we're looking for people that know what they're talking about,
Right.
This
Okay,
group does. I
or at
gotta
least,
run.
seem to anyway. Okay. Well, thank
James?
you all so very much.
thank you.
I will end the recording, and we will end this session.
James?